So the JBL Flip 6 truly is a great little Bluetooth speaker. Thanks to its new speaker setup, which consists of a woofer, a new tweeter, and your classic dual pass radiators, the Flip 6 really does sound great in a very compact package. But today, we're going to see if it's worth upgrading from the Flip 6 to the JBL Charge 5, and we're also going to see how the Flip 6 stacks up to the Sony XB33. Now, regarding pricing, the JBL Charge 5 is the most expensive speaker here, retailing for $180. The Sony XB33 has a retail price of $150, and the JBL Flip 6 has a retail price of $130. However, Sony does like to put the XB33 on sale from time to time for $120, and I expect JBL to put their speakers on sale from time to time as well. But no matter how you look at it, I expect the XB33 to always undercut the Charge 5 by a significant margin. Nonetheless, if you're going to pick any of these speakers up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch shelf down below. I've made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And if you've been watching me for a while, you know I can be very particular. So I'll only set my name on something that I'm really proud of. Now first, let's talk about the design of these speakers. Now obviously, you can take any of these speakers on the go with you because they're all fairly small. However, the Flip 6 is the smallest and most portable speaker here. Besides just being the smallest, the Flip 6 also has this built-in loop so you can attach it or hang it from something if you really wanted to. Whereas with these other two speakers, you can't. But besides that, all of these speakers are basically the same. They're all waterproof, so you don't have to worry about any of these speakers getting wet or even accidentally dropped into a pool. And all of these speakers should have no problem standing up to constant abuse from bumps and scrapes because their fabric wrap bodies should be able to take all of that. The only thing that you want to be mindful of are the exposed passive radiators on all of these speakers. But besides that, all of these speakers are durable and portable. But if you want maximum portability, then you'll want to go with the Flip 6. Pretty obvious. However, something the Sony XB33 does have over these two JBL speakers is that it has a built-in light feature, and I can't deny, this light feature looks pretty good. I personally really enjoy the illuminated woofers. Now, having a built-in light feature is nice, but please don't base your speaker purchase decision solely on a light feature. And also keep in mind, if you use this light feature, it does take its toll on the battery life. Now, the XB33 has an advertised battery life of 24 hours, noticeably more than these other two speakers. However, that advertised battery life of 24 hours is with the speaker playing at 50% volume, with the light feature turned off and while in stamina mode, which just makes the speaker sound super flat. Whereas if we were to use this speaker with the light feature turned on and with its extra bass mode turned on, which is how I suspect most people will want to use this speaker has an advertised battery life of 14 hours. So, real-world use with the speaker playing at 80% volume, with the light feature turned on, and with extra bass mode turned on, the speaker is good for about 7 hours of playback time. And if you were to use this speaker with the light feature turned off, then you could always extend its battery life out that way. But then there's the Charge 5, which has an advertised battery life of 20 hours, and a real-world use with the speaker playing at 80% volume, which is a really good listening volume. The speaker is good for about 10 hours of playback time. Then there's the Flip 6, which has an advertised battery life of 12 hours, and with it playing at 80% volume as well, it's good for about 8 hours of playback time. So overall, both of JBL speakers have better real-world battery life than the Sony XB33. But if you want maximum battery life, then you'll want to go with the Charge 5. Now, when it comes to charging these speakers, all of these speakers charge via a USB-C port as they should. However, with the Flip 6, the USB-C port is the only port that you'll find on the Flip 6. Whereas with both the Charge 5 and XB33, they have a USB-A out port so that you can charge your own devices. Now, personally, I think it's great and all that both the Charge 5 and XB33 have USB-A out ports, but personally, I think this port is going to become obsolete in the near future because most phones these days now just come included with USB-C to USB-C charging cables. And unfortunately, you can only use the USB-C port on all of these speakers strictly for charging. You can't use these USB-C ports to charge your own devices like you can with the JBL Extreme 3, and you also can't use these USB-C ports as a wired connection. And it's also important to point out that you can't use a wired connection with any of these speakers because none of them have an audio jack. And unfortunately, this is the new norm, and I still really feel that these speakers should have an audio jack just in case, especially the Charge 5. But for right now, you can only use all of these speakers wirelessly. But when it comes to Bluetooth connectivity, all of these speakers can be connected to two devices at the same time, which is great either if you're a power user, you can easily and quickly hot swap from one device to another, or this way, you and a friend can both be DJ. And when it comes to watching movies or videos on your phone, all of these speakers have zero latency across the board, whether you're using an iPhone or an Android device. But now let's talk about actually listening to music with these speakers. The Sony XB33 has your very standard speaker setup of dual frontward firing woofers and dual passive radiators that shoot out the sides. And the Sony XB33 is rated at 30 watts. But then there are JBL speakers. Both the Flip 6 and Charge 5 have a single frontward firing woofer, a single frontward firing tweeter, and dual passive radiators that shoot out the sides. Now the woofer on the Flip 6 is rated at 20 watts and the tweeter is rated at 10 watts. Whereas with the Charge 5, its tweeter is also rated at 10 watts, but its woofer is rated at 30 watts. Now the idea of having a tweeter and a woofer on both of JBL speakers is that it's going to help these speakers sound more open. But so that you can see for yourself, let me just show you.
A broken glass while I'm thinking in my head. I mind my own, I don't even break a sweat. Oh, this matters is insane. Why you still live in vain? I'm not the one, you're the victim of your own mistakes. It's time to hit the lights under the street lights. I'm not the one, you're the victim of your own mistakes.
So like you may have just seen, the woofers on the Sony XB33 handle both the mids and highs, whereas with both of these JBL speakers, the woofers handle the mids and the tweeters handle the highs, which is going to help these speakers sound more open and have better instrument separation. But now we're going to jump into the sound test. All of these speakers are playing with their stock EQs. However, the Sony XB33 is playing at 94% volume. The Flip 6 is playing at 81% volume, and the Charge 5 is just coasting here, playing at 70% volume.
A broken glass while I'm thinking in my head. I mind my own, I don't even break a sweat. Oh, this matters is insane. Why you still live in vain? I'm not the one, you're the victim of your own mistakes. It's time to hit the lights under the street lights, under the street lights. I'm not the one, you're the victim of your own mistakes. Untold stories, they were left behind. Silent breeze, I got nothing on my mind. This matters is insane. Why you still live in vain? I'm not the one, you're the victim of your own mistakes. It's time to hit the lights under the street lights, under the street lights.
So first, let's address the Charge 5 and Flip 6 here. From a performance standpoint, both of JBL speakers sound as open and have the same instrument separation as one another. However, with the Charge 5, you are going to get noticeably more bass, and it's also going to get louder as well. Whereas with the Flip 6, I can't help but feel that this speaker is a little quicker to juice up the highs. So the Flip 6 can at times sound a little brighter, whereas the Charge 5 sounds more balanced. Nonetheless, both of these speakers like to put an emphasis on the vocals, and the bass comes in hard when it has to. However, one thing the Flip 6 has over the Charge 5 for now is that it has a customizable EQ. And I say for now because the Extreme 3 now has a customizable EQ as well. And I expect the Charge 5 to also get this customizable EQ through a firmware update in the near future. But nonetheless, personally, I do like my Flip 6 with the bass raised one click and the treble lowered one click. But even if the Charge 5 doesn't have a customizable EQ, it still sounds and performs better than the Flip 6. But now let's focus on the XB33. Just like the Flip 6, the XB33 has an adjustable EQ. But from a performance standpoint, the XB33 just doesn't sound as open as these other two speakers. The XB33 does sound shallow and narrow. And since this speaker does shoot for a warmer sound signature, it just doesn't get as loud as these other two speakers. Overall, the Sony XB33 sounds fine and it gets the job done. But personally, I do feel the JBL Flip 6 performs better than the Sony XB33. And if you want the best sound quality here, then you simply just want to go with the Charge 5. But now let's talk about pairing these speakers up with other speakers. Now both the Charge 5 and Flip 6 are using JBL's Party Boost, meaning that you can pair them up to other JBL Party Boost speakers, like either a JBL Boombox 2, an Extreme 3, a Charge 5, a JBL Flip 5, a Flip 6, or to a JBL Pulse 4. And you can pair up to 100 speakers together. However, just keep in mind, you can only pair a Party Boost speaker to other JBL Party Boost speakers. Unfortunately, you cannot pair a JBL Party Boost speaker to any of JBL's older speakers using JBL Connect Plus. Now, I know this sucks, but JBL's Party Boost does have better range than JBL Connect Plus. So you're going to be able to cover a larger area with music with your speakers. And also, do keep in mind that you cannot pair a JBL Party Boost speaker to any of JBL's larger Party Box speakers. However, with Sony's Party Connect, you can wirelessly pair your XB33 up to any of Sony's larger box speakers, like either an XP700 or an XP500, or you could also pair your XB33 up to a Sony XG500, XP43, to another XP33, or to an XB23. And just like with JBL's Party Boost, you can pair up to 100 speakers together, which is obviously just a marketing ploy. However, just keep in mind that with Sony's Party Connect, you can only pair your Party Connect speaker to another Party Connect speaker. You cannot pair a Party Connect speaker to any of Sony's older wireless Party Chain speakers. Now, even though Sony's Party Connect does offer more flexibility than JBL's Party Boost, personally, I still prefer JBL's Party Boost because it's easier to use and it's more stable. Because with Sony's Party Connect, you are going to have to put up with some hiccups here and there. So if you're thinking about picking one of these speakers up and you plan on expanding your collection of speakers and constantly pairing them together, then personally I do recommend JBL because Party Boost is just easier and more reliable than Sony's Party Connect. But finally, here's the microphone test. Now JBL speakers don't have built-in microphones, and personally I really don't care. Because the microphone on the Sony XB33 sounds pretty bad if you're trying to take phone calls with the speaker. And for context, this speaker is like 3.5 feet away from me, facing right at me, and it's just sitting on a table, and I still sound pretty bad. But with all that being said, the JBL Flip 6 is a very capable small portable Bluetooth speaker. Thanks to its new speaker setup, which consists of a woofer, tweeter, and dual pass radiators, the Flip 6 sounds great. Specifically, it has great instrument separation and it sounds very open. The Flip 6 also has decent battery life for its size, and you can also customize its EQ. However, if you want more, you can always go with the JBL Charge 5. The speaker gets louder, it has more bass, and it sounds more balanced. And you're also going to get a little bit more battery life, and the customizable EQ should be right around the corner for the Charge 5. But then there's the Sony XB33. The speaker gets the job done, and it also has a neat looking light feature. But personally, I do feel the JBL Flip 6 overall performs better than the Sony XB33. It sounds better, and it has better real-world battery life. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit the like button and get subscribed. If you want to pick any of the products up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch. I made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And you know, I can be very particular, so I'll only slap my name on something that I'm really proud of.